Hello again, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. So, what do you do when you don't have a huge paid media budget? Do you know your target audience? And not just with a few personas, but do you really know your target audience and their pain points so that you can market and advertise to them more effectively? Rachel Zugschwert is the VP of Marketing at Lerner Publishing Group, and she's a subject matter expert in the children's book publishing industry and for knowing her target audience. And on this episode, we'll discuss really knowing your own target audience, the state of the state in the children's book publishing industry, what to do when you don't have a huge paid media budget, blogging to the right group, influencers, social media, and maybe even a bedtime story. So let's tune in to a children's storyteller with a storied shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today on A Shark's Perspective. What is your career background to date in a nutshell? Where do you come from?
I come from publishing. I've been in publishing for the majority of my career, and I have spanned trade publishing, children's publishing, self-publishing, all sorts of publishing in that time frame.
You are in the children's book industry now,
That's
and
correct.
you are responsible for great titles like Let's Draw Aliens and Spaceships with Crayola, How to Be a Zootopia Police Officer, and Bugs That Make Your Computer Crawl. So, let's talk about the industry a little bit. Publishing, children's book publishing, what is the status of the industry? I mean, we've seen so many book, retailers die off, but obviously Amazon is just destroying, the Barnes and Nobles of the world. But is the children's book industry thriving, growing? What's the status of it?
I would say it is holding fairly steady with an optimistic outlook right now. The segment of the industry that I'm in relies primarily on school and library sales, so we are a little bit more stable than the parts of the industry that really rely on those brick and mortar bookstores that you mentioned. Even there, with the loss of some of our national chain bookstores, we are finding a resurgence in independent bookstores that have really astonishingly come back from the brink of extinction in the last 10 years. And book sales through Amazon, of course, are growing as well. So, one thing that's great about the children's side of the industry is, for the most part, print still rules. You don't hand, a preschooler a digital device to read on,
Hey,
probably.
you
You're
give
still
every
buying.
toddler a Kindle.
Exactly. Your parents and grandparents are still generally buying board books and picture books. Schools, even schools that have gone heavily into using devices for homework, like Chromebooks or iPads, they still buy and use a lot of print books for various things. All the way up through, you're seeing some millennials reporting that they prefer print to digital. So, all of those things have impacted the publishing industry for sure, even in the 15 years that I've been in the business. But on the whole, it's steady and it's growing. Actually, there was just a report that came out, I think, last week, um, based on the first quarter sales for the year, and board books and young adult fiction were the two categories of books that were really growing, and that's where I'm at. So that's very nice.
And you guys are primarily what, pre-K to 12
Grade
or to
12.
8?
Yep.
Grade
Yeah,
12?
pre-K through grade 12.
Gotcha. So, how competitive is the industry? I know you're one of the biggest players in the market, but what's sort of the size? What are some of the names that people would resonate when they hear of in the industry?
For the most part, I would say generally people probably have not heard of any of us, but that's all right. Scholastic is probably the most recognizable.
Sure, everybody knows Scholastic.
Yeah, they span our industry as well as several others. They publish very popular trade books, and they also have divisions for textbooks and also, Scholastic book fairs and that sort of thing. So through the book fair program, Scholastic is a customer of ours. Through sort of book publishing, they're a competitor of ours. So we work with them in many capacities.
What is your typical type of buyer in the industry? Is it moms? Is it teachers, librarians? What's the audience other than kids that eventually get the books anyway?
Well, this is an interesting thing to think about. So, our primary buyer is a librarian, either a school librarian or a public librarian, collection development librarian. who is responsible for putting the books on the shelves. Our end user is, of course, a child. And so we have to be careful when we're thinking about um, writing the copy that goes on the back of the book, for example, which frequently also appears on like the Amazon listing. Who are we talking to at that point? Because they're two very different people. Um, but as I mentioned, our primary audience is the school and public librarians, which are really defined audiences. And the best thing to me about working in this segment of the industry is I am talking to people who really want to buy, who have to buy. It's part of their job to buy books for their collections. So they want to hear from me. Um, this is true for some segments of B2B marketing, but it's not necessarily true for B2C marketing. And even in B2B, sometimes you have people who don't believe that they need your product.
Hmm.
But for me, my customers, a big part of their job is to buy what I'm selling. So that makes marketing to them really, really fun in a way that I haven't experienced at some of my previous jobs.
Well, and obviously, you being one of the nation's largest publishers for children's books, that must mean you're just pouring millions and millions and millions of dollars into paid search, display, and social. Please tell me I'm
It's
not
it's like you've read
correct.
my budget.
Yeah, exactly. With just
Yeah.
a few less zeros.
Right. Well, yeah, the very interesting thing there is that because our audience is so well defined
Yeah.
and because this is a very mature industry, so it's not like there's big surprises about where to buy from coming down the pike. And also, unlike um, many businesses, when you're talking about school librarians, where they're allowed to buy from may be regimented by their school district. So they are told, here are your preferred vendors. And so we're not necessarily competing for direct search traffic or direct sales in a way that many other places have to. So we really don't focus a lot on paid search or paid social. We experiment with it, and we look for opportunities when we have a book that maybe lots of people are looking for outside of our target core audience. But for the most part, the people who are going to buy direct from us know where we are and how to find us. And the people who are not buying direct from us are buying from wholesalers where they either have to or prefer to purchase. So we focus on putting our search efforts, SEO efforts into the things that improve our listings in those databases.
Hmm. So you're really sort of adapting just more of a content marketing strategy then as a whole.
Right. We want to be useful to our core audience. We want to be top of mind when they are shopping. We make sure that they know about the most recent things that we have coming out or the most relevant things that we have coming out. But we don't have to play that traffic
Right.
game.
So what kind of content do you put out that helps them solve that problem?
Well, we do content marketing. The great thing about our products are full of content,
Hmm.
which
Yeah,
is very
exactly.
helpful. And then the authors behind that content are also content themselves because they frequently have additional information or they do school visits or an interview with how an author came to write a book is usually really interesting and you know librarians like to share that kind of thing with kids, so we are able to reach out to them in a lot of different ways using those various things. We do have a blog, we are present on social media, we just launched a podcast, we go to a lot of trade shows and try and connect with librarians wherever they already are.
What you were talking about with the authors themselves, though, these guys are not exactly it's not we're not talking about James Patterson or John Grisham or J.K. Rowling. I mean, when they're marketing out these products, though, I'm sure they're being aggressive, but they don't have nearly the audience that some of those larger, well-known authors do. But does that conflict with your marketing messaging? The convergence of where you're
Yeah,
talking to the teachers, the librarians, the moms, that the librarians is your primary audience. The authors themselves, their audience is not going to necessarily be in a direct path to the librarians, is it?
that's right. And the way we work with that is generally we sort of have divvied up these markets. We, the publisher, are focused on reaching the decision makers, the buyers, the librarians. The authors we encourage to reach out to set up school visits. If we have an author who's written a book about science, they might want to be talking to the science teacher. Um, the Some of our authors are so well established in their fields that they have a booking agent who's booking them speaking tours. So it doesn't have to be a big audience like J.K. Rowling has, as long as it is the right audience for getting that um, author in front of the right school
So you actually
to engage them.
have children's authors that are going on speaking
School
tours
visits.
or school visits.
Yep. Yep.
National, they're not just local guys in the Minneapolis St. Paul area.
Right. Right. I mean, our authors are from all over the country, all over the world, and many of them do the local things. Maybe
Yeah,
they're known as a beloved local author, and so they're going to go to the elementary school every single year or something like that. Um, but many of our authors get invited to speak at schools outside of their local area. Many of them charge to do so. Many of them charge to do Skype visits with
sure.
classrooms. So there's a really well established model within the educational system where schools are trying to bring authors in and have students meet them or hear them talk and learn how a book is made.
So how many books, if I'm a well-known, well-published author of a children's book, one that both Lerner or any type of publisher could put out, and I'm going through a national speaking tour, what kind of numbers are there behind those kind of authors with the number of book sales they're doing?
Oh, it really
Oh,
varies. It
sure.
is amazing how much it varies. I mean, we generally would expect to see several thousand copies a year, and it can get much, much higher than that for books that get added to, reading lists, required reading, like the summer reading list that you take home. And then every kid in the eighth grade in in the whole state has to read that book
Gotcha. So then
every year.
every year.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. That's a good point. How much different when you look at children's books is it than the regular book publishing industry? And I prefer print to digital. Just I hate to see what it does to kids' eyes over time. You got every kid in second grade wearing glasses. But do you look at the industry and just see completely, is it completely different? Is it somewhat similar?
Sure. Well, I have worked in that part of the industry,
Yeah,
which is great. So I started my career at Simon and Schuster, and I worked on books for grown-ups, regular books, books that you've heard of, and it was very different, very, very different. Those publishers, like I said, they are competing with everything else that's out there available for you to do, from video games to watching a movie to playing on your iPad to renovating your house. Whatever you want to do is competing with your time at listening to podcasts. It's competing with your time that you could be reading a book. And just generally, marketing to consumers is challenging and has really only gotten more challenging as we now have many more avenues in which to market to consumers. It was very fun to work on books that I am also the audience for, which is not true now. But in all other respects, it was much more of a sort of rat race or hamster in a wheel sort of feeling where you just have to keep coming out with more. Nobody wants an old book. And so that's a difference. The similarities would be that people who like to read like to read. Um, there are statistics that show most people don't read one book a year. A handful of people read 4 to 10 books a year, and then another handful of people read like 200 books a year. So if you can find the right audience that's a really heavy, voracious reader, or book clubs or that sort of thing, your effort is a lot easier there.
well, they should have added my category, which is people that color at least 2 dozen books a year. So
Yeah, that's a legit category
a
for a
legit
while.
category, absolutely. So then, how do you look at influencers? I gave a speech not that long ago at a conference talking about influencer marketing, something I've spoken at many times before. I'm a big proponent of it. But influencers with authors, for example, they basically a well-known established author is an influencer with generally his own fairly substantial following. But when you look at leveraging an influencer also to help promote a book, it's obviously a much harder thing to do when it's a 7 or 6 year old or something like that. It's also different with moms depending on what they're trying to put out. But I mean, again, you're trying to influence an audience that's full of librarians. So how do you look at somebody for influencer marketing? Do you even consider something like a Ryan Tubery, who's the darling of YouTube and Walmart, whose Forbes says is making something like $20 million a year with Ryan's toy review. I mean, is there that sort of capability that you've seen in the marketplace, or have we even approached that with influencer marketing with kids?
Yes and no. So there, I would say that publishing may have been the originator of influencer marketing because for decades and decades we've put blurbs from other authors on the jackets and covers of books,
Exactly.
or from the New York Times or whoever says something nice about it. So there's a well-established history of doing that sort of um, what I would consider as a kind of influencer marketing. We do find that our authors are great influencers, both of their work and other authors' work.
Sure.
Many years ago, I did a project with the publisher that I was working with at the time, and we set up sort of a mentorship program where a well established author would help promote the work of a brand new author um, for 6 months to a year. They did events together. They did, the more established author would recommend, we call it blurbing, would blurb the new author's work and mention it on social media and that sort of thing, which worked really very well. You have to have special, generous people who are willing to do that because some people find that threatening. I didn't ever see it turn out to hurt the established author's work. So there's that. Um, there are other sort of you'd call them influencers within the niches of the publishing world. Before Twitter was a thing, we called them big mouths, and there were people at competing publishing houses that you would send your book to because they just talked to everybody about
Hmm.
whatever they were reading. That still exists. We find that there are reviewers from our trade journals who review books, or people who've been on awards committees who we consider big mouths and influencers. Booktubers are a thing, people who review books on YouTube. We've not done too much with that because, like I said, our focus is not on consumer marketing, but that is, a segment that is available to us as well. So we do take advantage of influencer marketing, and uh, the biggest probably the biggest way that that comes into play is literally getting a review or a recommendation for a book that we then put on the cover of the book.
Right. Well, if we could just get, Kim Kardashian to promote 30-minute rainy day science projects, I really think that would elevate
Maybe
the
I'll send
sales.
her, yeah, I'll send her a copy.
Eh,
I will say, I mean, it was, I think, last month or the month before, Freddie Prinze Jr.
Yeah.
Um, showed himself reading one of our books, and that was very surprising and did very well for the book. And I don't think that he needed it, frankly. The book is called How Not to Be a Dick. And as far as I know, he's a pretty nice guy.
Yeah.
But so that happens occasionally that celebrities do get a hold of our books. And
Eh,
Oprah used to be the biggest book influencer.
Sure.
Now that she no longer has her show, it's we're waiting for a new.
Well, I tell
Right.
you, two moms who've had kids in high school that you could probably reach out to who have already shown a willingness to exude some influence,
Mhm.
to help. I think if you would look at reaching out to like Felicity Huffman and Lori Laughlin,
That'd
they
probably
would
go over
be,
really well right now.
wouldn't it? It'd be so,
Yeah.
some K through 12 books. I mean, there are a lot that are on how to get into college, and I think
We
they
have a
would,
couple of those. Yep.
yeah, they might be available at a lower price right
Yeah,
now. So,
they could be.
so if you're an author, then what does an author need to know? Because that's a very competitive space, and has been for years. I mean, what should an author need to know if they sort of approach trying to get books out there today?
Well, it is competitive, it is
Yeah.
challenging, and it's also very difficult. It seems it's just a kid's book. It's not that many words. How hard could it be?
Exactly.
Turns out
Exactly.
it's really difficult, and I
Yeah.
definitely could not do it. I got into the publishing industry as pretty much everybody does, thinking I was going to be an editor.
Yeah.
Turns out I would be a terrible editor because it's really hard to do to tell a good story. I think most marketers would say that copywriting is one of the most difficult parts of their job
Sure.
because it's hard. It's hard to write well and write concisely and tell a good story and also get across all the information that you need to get across in a limited space.
Agreed. So how important especially with children's books then compared to even adult books, or maybe even not comparing it, but how important is social media really to your business and children's books in general?
I know of one time ever in the history of the world that Twitter sold a book because the person, like, I tweeted about a book and somebody tweeted back at me, "That looks great. I just ordered it from Amazon."
Wow.
But the majority of the time, social media is very nice for building awareness and very nice for feeling like you are getting something done. And it does very little to really move the sales needle. But social media is really important for helping people discover your content marketing. It's helpful for building relationships. It's helpful for being top of mind when people are thinking about making a purchase. That does not mean that they're going to see our latest tweet about our latest makerspace title and go order it right away, but it does help you stay at the top of mind. So we do a lot of social media. We have put a lot of time into the planning process and try not to be super reactive. We also watch for trends on social media, but we try to rein in the effort that we put against it in recognition of the fact that that is not a sales driver and it's not going to be.
Then, at least what are the most important things that you can think of from a marketing standpoint that you've seen not only in this industry but just in your career in general to make certain that you're hitting the right targets for you?
I would say that it is really crucial to know your target audience. And I'm not talking about like building personas and giving them fancy names,
Oh,
but
that's what everybody else does. Come on.
I know that's what everybody else does. But what I mean is knowing who buys and and why they buy. And I don't need to know their favorite color or their favorite coffee flavor to do that. But what it enables you to do if you know their uh, either their buying motivations or the sort of pain points that you're trying to meet with your product, it tells you what to say no to. For us, like search ads, not really going to help us that much because that's not how they're finding us. Either they know us and they're going right to our site, or they're going through wholesalers. So that's something that I can safely ignore. Um, it helps you focus the resources that you do have and makes you more relevant to them. One of the things that we discovered when I came to Lerner, we took a really close look at our blog traffic and discovered that we were not being consistent in the content that we were providing. And so we were
Hmm.
actually talking to three different audiences on our blog, two of whom we don't, marketing doesn't really want to talk to. One of those is potential authors. I don't want to talk to potential authors because I'm marketing. They need to be talking to editorial.
Yeah.
Um, the second one was consumers. And again, that's not a key core audience for us. Most people, consumer level, do not engage with publishers. They don't know who the publisher of any given book is, and they don't care. And that's fine. It doesn't matter. So we really shifted our focus on the content that we were creating so that we're only writing for our core audience. It means that writing assignments have gotten much easier. It is easier to plan. It is more useful to the readers because now they're not skipping over posts that aren't relevant to them. They can see at a glance that everything we're writing about is useful to them. So when you know your target audience, you can be more useful and therefore more valuable to them as a marketer. That translates into sales.
So then, how do you look at attribution on your different marketing efforts? Is it just strictly looking at total sales, or how do you judge it? Per your point of being, one book being sold on Twitter,
Yeah.
wherever you're putting money, how are you trying to judge that?
We use a lot of different metrics. We look at engagement. We look at affinity. We run affinity models for basically all of the schools in the United States uh, about every other year, so that we have a good sense of um, what types of schools are most aligned with what we're doing, and then we can extrapolate that to rural, urban, suburban, geographic area, that sort of thing. We can see trends that way, especially with what people thought for a while was going to be a shift from print books to digital books, and it didn't happen. So we were able to see when that started coming back to print. We look at all of our email marketing automation does lead scoring and that kind of thing, so we can just see how people engage in that result. So sales is a big part of it, but because so much of our sales goes through wholesalers, um, it's a little bit more opaque there, as you would find with a consumer product goods, any product there. So we really look more at different metrics to see how we're doing.
Is self-published books in children's books as strong in the children's industry as it has become in the normal adult publishing world? Because there are so many authors that are self-publishing now, sort of removing the barriers of entry and then putting their books out on Amazon. And especially in marketing, there's a lot of top influencers who self-publish as well. But do you see that as something really approaching, or is that sort of continue to be pretty gated as far as the audiences go that you're selling to eventually?
Yeah, it's challenging. So it's not impacting our sales very much, and it probably one thing that it might be impacting, and this isn't possible to measure, is would those authors have been able to publish with that same book with a traditional publisher and it done better for them? Because the challenge with self-publishing, and I'm a fan of self-publishing, by the way, I'm going to say that I think that for some people, not everybody needs to go to a publisher. If you've got a platform or a way to sell your books, you don't need a publisher. And
Yeah,
if you do go with a publisher, you should have an agent or a lawyer look over your contract, because the publisher is doing that, so you should too. So I'll say that. So I think that there is a lot of room for self-publishing. The challenge of self-publishing is that many people think, well, I'll just get a book and then I'll put it on Amazon and the world will beat away to my door. And you know, that doesn't happen for authors who do have a publisher.
exactly.
And I think people really overestimate how much work that is. And that is especially dangerous for children's book authors, because these books are so expensive to produce. A four color 32-page picture book is much more expensive than a business book written for adults, in terms of the actual cost, the fees that self-published author is paying up front, and they're much less likely to recoup their investment. And that's what I really hate to see, because the economics of it don't make sense from the outside. You would think that a longer book would be more expensive, but when you add color into it, and this,
Yeah.
and, bindings and all that, it's really hard for self-published children's authors uh, to make money doing this. If it's a labor of love and you just want to have it for you and your grandkids, go for it. If you want people to read your work, to be exposed to your work, I really recommend a traditional publisher who can get you into national bookstores, independent bookstores, libraries. Many libraries do not stock self-published books at all, because there's so many, they can't do it.
What do you see as next? What's the future hold for the children's book publishing industry? If you had to look into your medium to long term view, I mean, if we look at just books and how everything is digitized and going to the web and to Kindles and devices and things like that, are children's books following that same path?
Yes, but I think a little bit more slowly. I think that the digital shift probably will happen, but I think it will be much slower than predicted. At one point, people were saying that by 2010, more than 25% of book sales would be digital. That never happened, and it went back the other way a little bit. But I think as technology changes and as generations age up and are more accustomed to using um, iPads, or I mean, once upon a time, schools used chalk and slate to teach. Now it's paper, then it's the iPad. Like, it's going to evolve, and that's fine. But I think it will take a longer time, and I think it will be more like a pendulum. Like, it will swing to one side and then the other and then back, and then long term we'll probably move to digital first, or mostly digital access of this content. Um, but I do think that print books will have a place for a very long time. And at least at Lerner, we are well positioned. We do ebooks of every print book that we do. We have various formats of digital versions. So we have interactive books that have audio, and use that content in a way that it's different from the print. It's not just looking at the print on your device. It does other things. So I think that might be more where we go in the future. Costs are really prohibitive both to create and to buy that kind of thing right now, but that might change. Another thing is augmented reality, I think, may have a bigger role in education than many people think, either augmented or virtual reality, but starting with augmented reality. It allows you to use printed content in a way that literally brings the digital world into the print as opposed to the other way around. So I think that's really interesting and could change. Once upon a time, I think it might have been Thomas Edison who came up with this whole idea of how video was the new way of education, and they got rid of all, they launched this big program. All the curriculum was going to be video based for the future, and this was way, way, way ahead of his time. And he's probably right. I mean, think about if you're doing like a project on your house and you don't know how to do it, you go to YouTube and you look for a tutorial.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have those, you know, old manuals like those. There used to be books about how to do stuff around your house, like how to do crown molding or something like that, that were printed and that sold really, really well. And now that's all on YouTube for free, people putting it out there for free. So we may move more towards a video based curriculum and educational model. But again, it's going to take a lot of time because it's so expensive to produce. And then you have to train people how to teach with this new teaching tool. So in the short term, I don't think much is going to change. In the medium term, we'll inch a little bit more towards digital. In the long term, really long term is where we're looking at massive change to the industry, in my opinion.
Well, Rachel, you are very far from many ocean waters, and I've never heard of a shark in the Minnesota beaches off Lake Superior, but I have seen them at the aquarium at the Mall of America, which was actually pretty outstanding. So I have to ask, what is your favorite kind of shark and why?
All right. I'm going to sing for you. Are you ready?
Okay. Oh God.
Baby shark. Do, 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 do. Now that song is stuck in your head.
Yeah, it will be. It has been for way too
Forever.
long. So
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
I think you just made them another $5 when you sang that. So
Probably so. I would say the whale shark in real
really,
life because I think they're very cute, even though they're enormous.
they are enormous. It's the largest fish in the world. So
That's right.
well, Rachel, it is that special time in the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
I am so ready.
Okay, so here we go. The Minnesota Twins or the Minnesota Wild?
I have to say the Twins because I am 2 blocks away from the stadium.
Oh, not bad. Number 2, board books or picture books?
I guess picture books because my kids are out of the board book phase and we are reading a lot of picture books right now.
Gotcha. So number 3, storytelling in content marketing or storytelling at bedtime with your children?
Oh, storytelling at bedtime with my children, for sure.
Amen. Number 4, Dr. Seuss or Clark the Shark? And remember which show you're on.
Well, I would have said Clark the Shark anyway, but I actually don't know what Clark the Shark is, so I'm writing this down so I can look for it from the library.
You don't know Clark the Shark?
I don't.
Oh my gosh, yeah, you've got a Clark the Shark books they're good. They're funny. So,
Sea creatures are just so popular with kids. We've been reading through the narwhal and jellyfish series, and they just love them, and like octonauts and
this podcast, it's why I call it the Shark's Perspective. It has a huge following in pre-K through 6th grade.
I would believe that.
Yeah. And the number 5 and the most important question that you're going to be asked today, and also a question that would resonate with pre-K through 6th graders is biscuits or cornbread?
That's not fair. I would say both biscuits and cornbread and both with honey, thank you.
No, got to pick one.
No. Uh, hmm. Making or eating? Because I'm not making biscuits.
Eating.
Eating. Okay. Biscuits because I'm eating them, not making them.
There you go. So, Rachel, where can people find out more about you, follow you on social, get your thought leadership, buy a book?
Sure. Yep. That would be great. We are at Lerner Books on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I am at Rachel Zuggs on Twitter, and I'm on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Rachel, for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
Thanks for having me.
So there was my conversation with Rachel Zugschwert, the VP of Marketing at Lerner Publishing Group, and she's a subject matter expert in the children's book publishing industry and for knowing her target audience. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with her. First, interesting point on audience and influencers that they use, which are basically the authors of these books, in that they don't have to have a massive following for influence as long as it is the right audience for getting that author in front of the buyers. Remember that it may not scale the same. It's kind of the targeting versus reach argument. However, a smaller influence with real influence on their flock can be much more powerful than a large influencer with more followers, but less influential to make the impact that you need. Second, social media isn't for everyone as a sales channel. For her, social media builds awareness but doesn't move the sales needle. It's a good reminder that social media is really important for helping people discover your content marketing, though. It's helpful for building relationships and helpful for being top of mind when making a purchase. Third, Rachel provides an always needed reminder that you must know your target audience. You've got to know what their pain points are. It will tell you what to say no to in your marketing and advertising choices and make you more relevant to your audience. She brings up a great example of where they were writing too much blog traffic to 2 groups that they were not even interested in marketing to because those were the wrong groups to drive sales. So what does added focus on her audience do for her and possibly for you? It makes it easier to write, easier to plan, and keeps customers from skipping your ads and your content. Great quote when she said, "So when you know your target audience, you can be more useful and therefore more valuable to them as a marketer. That translates into sales." Great point. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. It's been my privilege. So to the Avengers Endgame, thank you for such awesome stories. To my audience, I love you 3000. Join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.